The Alldus podcast is brought to you by Alldus International, supplying your expert AI and digital transformation staffing needs across the US and Europe. Today, you are listening to our ServiceNow series, where we interview the best and brightest of the industry to share their story, advice, and views on the exciting world of ServiceNow and digital transformation.
Hello everyone, it is Mark Kelly. I hope you're doing fantastic wherever you are in the world. And a part of our ServiceNow podcast series, we have got Sukhi Gill, CTO of Calitii, and he's joining us on the episode with over 40 years of digital transformation experience. Sukhi, thank you very much for joining us on the show today.
Mark, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Before we get into the world of ServiceNow, tell me a little bit about your journey across those 40 years.
So, Mark, I started in UK government. That's when my career started in the civil service. Post-college with an IT background, I wanted to get into an IT field, but it was a bit of a circuitous route. I ended up working in government as a civil servant before I moved into the IT department for the Inland Revenue. And then, to be honest, my journey over 40 years was quite a simple one, because having done work in actual taxation and social security at the time, and then pivoted into the IT department, that went from around 84 all the way through to 94, when there was a period of outsourcing going on in the UK. John Major, the Prime Minister at the time, was doing some outsourcing of government departments, and the whole IT department for the Inland Revenue was outsourced to EDS, Electronic Data Systems. It was a Ross Perot company. It was owned by GM at the time. 96, it was spun out from GM as a separate entity. And so I went from civil service to EDS. In EDS, obviously going from civil service to private sector, made my stance in delivering very large, complex IT systems. And as a result of that, they fast-pathed me through as a consultant systems engineer. I would say my skills at the time were architect and developer, but became more of an enterprise architect. And then, long story short, EDS was bought by HP in 2008. HP then itself transformed and spun into two companies, HP and HPE. I ended up on the HPE side. The services side went with the enterprise group. And then in 2017, the Enterprise Services Group was spun out of HPE, formed with CSE to form DXE. And that's where I was latterly until around 23, when I took a sabbatical and then decided to get back. You know, the brain wasn't ticking fast enough, spending a year off traveling. So we set up a company, Pat and I co-founded Calitii, and we're the sort of fastest growing ServiceNow startup in the UK at the moment.
What was the moment that said, I want to take a break, I want to put a pause, where so many of us are on the treadmill where, yes, we'll take 1 or 2 weeks to go to Santander, but we take a year off to actually recharge, travel, and actually do what we want to do?
So I'm an adventurer of types, right? I do some sort of crazy things. I've done Everest Base Camp twice, the traditional route, as well as the Gokyo Valley tour. I've done Annapurna trek in Africa, etc. Right? My knees are starting to give me trouble, and I was like, "Hey, I want to do more mountains before I can't." Right? So if I keep working at this rate, I won't get stuff done. So I took a year off. I didn't do that many mountains, not at the same level of the Himalayas, but I did Antarctica, I did Alaska, I went to Borneo for a month. So there's a whole bunch of stuff I managed to get done in that year. But the driving force was partially, I want to do stuff before I can't. But the other point was, I'd worked in very large enterprises for a long time, and it's difficult to drive change inside those organizations. Very difficult. You can have all the best ideas, but unless you can convince the highest paid person, it's sometimes difficult to get your ideas come to light. I'd actually had these pockets of success where HP and DXE had spun out small companies as startups. And it was such fun working in those startups. And I kept trying to go back to the enterprise and say, hey, look, the way we spun out this company and achieved something, why can't we do that inside the enterprise? And I realized probably at the point at which I took a sabbatical was you can't do that. There's a culture that you have to fight against to drive that innovation. It's almost, you have to cannibalize the current business to drive change, and not many people are willing to do that.
Tell me about what it's like being one of the fastest, if not the fastest, in that ServiceNow ecosystem partner in the UK. What are the key learnings? How do you keep going at that trajectory? What's the ingredients? What's the secret sauce?
So I think the secret is the people. One of the things I found as I was a fellow at EDS and HP, I worked with smart people, very smart people, and it was infectious, right? You would bounce ideas off people who would push back or give you something back that would develop your idea. And towards the end of my career at HP and DXC, I wasn't getting that as much, right? Some of the people had left, and I just felt I didn't have that peer group. And when I set the company up with Pat, I wanted to hire the best and the brightest. And the thing I feel that excites me every day is working with the team that we have. We have a collaborate channel in Teams. There isn't a day somebody doesn't post it and 10 people respond with better ways to evolve that idea. Or here's what I've done. It might not be the same, but let me share. That kind of sharing and collaboration, maybe we will struggle when we get large as well, but that's something we really do well at Calitii, and it's infectious. I was talking to somebody on Friday and I said, hey, post that on Calitii Collaborate. I'm sure there'll be 5 or 6 people who'll have an idea on that, and that's exactly what happened, right?
But you foster that culture. What enabled you to make the decision to just let it go, where the perfectionist in you didn't want to try to control it because it's your baby, right? You're starting it out. You want to make sure that you get the best foot forward. How do you, I suppose, get that balance correct?
So sometimes I know the answer and it's better not to say it, to let somebody else come up with the idea. And sometimes I really have to bite my tongue or hold my pen is the phrase. And I'm going, look, I'm going to let that go because I've got an idea, but I want the team to have a little think about this. The other thing I found was reverse mentoring. I actually find that letting the graduates or the people who are early in their career actually think about the problem actually makes my idea better than when I do actually push something forward, because I'm looking at theirs going, I didn't think about that. That's really interesting perspective, right? And so it's too often you'll get a 40-year experience perspective, which is useful, but might be a bit dated than somebody who looked at this fresh with a different angle, right? And so I really value that input from the next gen. I'll give you a real example. We did a demo on identity and access management to a bank in New York. The newer team that had come together, these are people who were only early in their career, postgraduate, but a couple of years of experience. They actually took the concept we were trying to build and built something, and they did the demo. And when they did the demo, the bit of coaching, we said to them, less PowerPoint, more demo, right? But when the presentation started with the client, I had not been in any of the rehearsals. And I was looking at the screen and Giancarlo was doing the presentation and there was no slide. And I'm like, there's no slide. So I was posting at people in the background going, I can't see the slides. And they went, you told them not to use slides. There are no slides, right? And so the monologue from Giancarlo was actually quite captivating because he played the persona of one of the people in the company and what they would do on the first day of their job. And then all of a sudden he said, right, now I've described the scenario, let me do the demo. And it was really powerful, right? And I was like, oh, wow, with a little bit of steering, they've taken it another level, right? Taken it to another level. And we had to sort of applaud, right? Even the customer said, you knocked it out of the park. But post the event, I said, guys, that was just incredible. Can you do the demo to the entire company so everybody can see not only what you did, but the culture we're trying to foster, which is with a bit of steering, you made it your own. It's like, cover version of a song that's better than the original. It was
Yeah.
that kind of thing we were
What
trying
a
to get.
wonderful example to bring through leadership. That was just
Yeah.
a really, really good example to do it. From more the technical aspects of ServiceNow, where's the foundation? What do you think the knowledge base is? If there's a strong starting point or a strong core, where do you kind of point
So,
to?
so there's an interesting topic. Do you take software engineers who are good at JavaScript and get them to understand process and business transformation? Or do you get business consultants who understand business process and transformation and get them to be engineers? You need a bit of both, by the way, right? And so the foundation in ServiceNow is that it is a platform. So software as a service platform, but it's codified a set of processes. And historically, a lot of customers, definitely the banks we deal with, they implemented ServiceNow as an IT service management platform or an IT asset management platform. And they implemented it probably even a decade ago. Some of them, there are not many who are now greenfield. A lot of them have had this for a while. The thing is, the platform's grown over the last 10 years. And so there's a lot of rebaselining and getting back to out of the box is the term that's used. So let's use the processes and the data model that exists rather than the customization. So the good thing about ServiceNow is you can customize it. The bad thing about ServiceNow is you can customize it, right? And so a lot of people are now trying to get rid of the customizations, get to the what comes out of the box so they can build it. And so my perspective around this for technologists and business process people is you need both really to come together to look at the outcome. Don't focus on the technology. Don't focus just on the process. Focus on the outcome the customer's after. Start with the outcome in mind. Then look at what that means from multiple dimensions. Look at what that means from a technology. Look at what that means from a process perspective, but also look at what that means to the people who will be using the system. What's the transformation they're going to go on? And then the two aspects we look at a lot are how are you going to govern it to maintain this out of the box approach, and then also think about the data. The journey to AI is one of progressing data. So get that data clean into the system so it can be used by machine learning and to build some of the AI hype that's out there. But definitely from ServiceNow, obviously there are capabilities around the Now Assist that are practical and available now.
Within the financial services kind of banking kind of area, how do you go on that journey within a regulated area? Because it becomes even more challenging.
Yeah, look, this is our strength, right? So, I'm not doing a marketing pitch here, but that's what we focus on. We focus on regulated industries, and our starting position is understanding the regulations that are applicable in this particular industry. What we do find is that a lot of the banks are struggling with the amount of regulation and the change to that regulation, maintaining a stance which says I've understood the regulation, I've by paragraph, by citation, I've converted that into a set of controls and I've implemented those controls. Here, Mr. Regulator, look at the controls to show that I'm in control of my environments, right? And given the cybersecurity threat and the DORA regulation that's come into the EU, the regulators are pushing even more onto the banks to say it's not good enough that you just know where the assets are. We want to know that you've got complete control of end of life of these assets, of the software that's installed on the assets, the updates that need to take place on a regular basis, given the vulnerability of these software and IT assets. So it's a permanent inspection. I would probably say that our initial business was driven off helping banks to meet this objective, which is how do I deliver up-to-date, accurate inventories that have the right controls in place so I can evidence to the regulators that I've actually got control of my environments.
When you think about those steps and doing it the right way, no shortcuts. You're digitizing those SOPs, but you're doing it with the customer solution end in mind. What advice would you offer to people coming into the ServiceNow ecosystem? Whether or not they're a partner, they're new to the journey, what advice are you sharing?
The most important thing, focus on the outcome before you jump to the technology. The product, you could call it a SKU, is only one element of the solution. Think about all dimensions: people, process, technology, governance, data. And then the whole agile movement that shifted, waterfall software engineering into agile, obviously is in place here with banks. So you can, even with ServiceNow, you can do MVPs. You can quickly stand up something to show the art of the possible. You do that as part of organizational change management and transition and transformation of the people who will have to sustain and operate. Look, we work in projects. All good projects have a start and an end. What happens at the end of the project? The people who are currently running the current system have to run this new system that you built for them. So make sure that they're ready, they're involved in the project. They're not just at the end of the project receiving this thing. What we find is, successfully dealing with an audit finding, there's a project phase, but the real proof that you've met the regulation is in the sustain phase, when you actually operate the system in steady state, because that's when you're transacting and actually executing on the controls and showing evidence that the controls are in place. So it's as important to get those people who are going to operate the system familiar with the system. Look, ServiceNow has got an awesome workflow engine and an integration platform in there, but you've got to get the people to understand what's being automated and codified. And then I would say build a continuous improvement mechanism. There's always things you can improve and make better.
Rather than just do a statement of work to someone and your box is ticked on to the next person, because you never get buy-in if you just do that. You need to help people on that change. And I found it's a 5-to-1 ratio. Yes. 5-to-1 of playing, getting involved in the messy process of doing, and then building the confidence and the self-esteem to feel like you're ready now to take over and go on that journey. Because we've all watched the videos, we've read the text, but until you're actually involved, immersing yourself in that safe place, or I like to say is that playfulness, it's all academic.
I absolutely agree. Right. And I would say that the way we do it is, in the scope of work, we make sure we call out the other, I call them lines of development. I did 8 years in defense, both DoD and MOD as part of my career, EDS and HP. And in defense, they talk about multiple lines of development to deliver a capability, where technology is only one of the lines of development. The other ones are the people, process, the governance, the data, and so on. And so when we write a scope of work, that could be, can you implement vulnerability response? We go, yes, but where are you going to do the other lines of development that will deliver this capability, this end-to-end capability? And if you're not going to address those, who is? Who's going to do the process? Who's going to do the organizational change management? Who's going to be the governance of the data that's generated from this system, right? And so talking that through with customers, I think builds confidence that you're not only a master of the technology domain, but you're actually master of the transformation domain. You're going to help them deliver the outcome, which isn't always replacing one technology with another. Well, so it's rarely replacing one technology with the other. The transformation is in outcome terms. I'll give you an example. One customer recently said to me, well, if we automate this workflow, we should be able to save 20 hours of a manager's time. And I went, okay, multiply that by X number of managers. That's actually pretty reasonable. But isn't the real prize the people who use the system? And he said, what do you mean? And I went, well, you're talking about onboarding and offboarding agents onto a business service desk. What if you could reduce attrition of business service agents? What if you could onboard them more quickly? Aren't those benefits really the ones you're after? The manager time, obviously, we can help improve, but the real outcome is the people who use the system, not just the managers of the system. And he stood back and he went, gosh, yeah, there's a bigger prize here. That's the thing that really gives me a buzz, right? Now, when you start talking we could say, we could cut 20% of the workforce. That is a real sensitive topic, and you don't want to lead with that, right? You help the customer work out, what could we do with 20% capacity in our workforce? That's the way to help them transform.
Sukhi Gill, CTO Calitii, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast today.
Mark, thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Alldus podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and any Android podcast of choice. You can also head over to our website, www.alldus.com, to listen to more podcasts, view our open roles, and stay up to date with industry news. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for more great episodes coming very soon.